I mean, you don't need to preach to me as that. Again, a few years ago, I was involved in women's football as well, coaching, and it's certainly something that I've thoroughly enjoyed. And again, I've been involved in men's football and boys youth football as well, and it's again probably the most enjoyable time coaching. I feel I think coaching obviously at Hearts under 19s at the time, girls team again just it's almost sort of the players there, the right attitude, even though they're maybe going through studies and just growing up, the trials and tribulations that come with that as well. But every session you had was enjoyable, and I said the quality of football as well. I think was fantastic, and I think the whole, for me, one of the things that people always compare with is, the women's game and the should it be on full size pitches and the goalkeepers are 2B and all those sort of lazy stereotypes as well. That when you're comparing it like for like, it's completely different. And as I said, some of the best players, even now in Scotland, some of the best players we have are in the women's Scottish national team. We've got players that play for Real Madrid and down south in the Premiership down south. And again, it's just almost like, oh yeah, but it's not the men's game. You're comparing apples and oranges for me. And I think, as you said, having that experience, and obviously you've kind of went to press conferences, got to interview the national team manager for the women's team and stuff like that several times, like stuff like that, which again must have held you in good stead.
Especially that like Greg, to me, that's just like pinch yourself moment things. And sometimes even when I say to people, "Oh, I'm going to this or that for work," I don't even think they can get the grasp of just like some of my friends seem to think I'm reporting and live life for Larry, and it's not. It's just in watching a football game, you go home and you get paid for it. But it's a lot of this that you're thinking of, as I mentioned earlier, like thinking the questions to ask. You're thinking what's going to be right lead for this or things like that. And even just the whole experience when you first do it, you're sitting in that big chamber at Hampden and interviewing like the national team manager, not if it's men's or women's, or speak about players down south. Last time I was reporting at Hampden, it's been about April time. I interviewed Darren Cuthbert pitch side, and that was something that she plays for Chelsea, probably my Italian Weir, probably my two favourite Scotland players. So to be up close to someone of that stature, plays for one of the best WSL sides, and then get to interview them pitch side at the National Stadium, where as I said, I got on football buses as a kid to watch Aberdeen there, or still go there to watch Scotland and Aberdeen. To be that one, it's like, oh, I'm actually I'm getting to do what I'd hear Brian McLaughlin and all these people in sports I'm doing. It is a pinch yourself moment, absolutely.
Good. And almost another sort of pinch yourself moment was obviously we mentioned it earlier on in the show that probably over a year ago now you've joined a national newspaper in terms of the Daily Record. And again, for those that maybe from out of Scotland that watching this, you never know, it's YouTube is international. It's the Daily Record is one of the main national newspapers, both in terms of the news coverage and of course kind of more commonly for sports coverage as well. How did that come about?
Well, it all leads back to this women's football stuff, to be honest. And probably going back to that other options from uni, I'd done a bit of men's football later near the end of my masters through Not the Old Firm, which was a student-run site as well. So I kind of built up a portfolio of match reports and interviews and everything from there. And it was edging towards the end of my masters, but I was doing another dissertation for my masters. So I was having to do that process again as well throughout the last summer it was, summer 2021. And I think I was speaking to Andrew Southwick about what I'm going to do next and all that, because you're still not, masters will help you get industry ready, but it's still that next task, as we all know, of getting that job through
that interview.
and pitching yourself to be like to an editor and all that why you in what I'd say is quite an oversaturated industry, or a lot of people do want to do this career path, why I'm the best person to be there. And it was just a case of I was lucky. I'll always use the lucky phrase that Andrew Southwick knew the record had lost a few people, so they were going to be recruiting, and also knew one of the editors there. So he put me in touch, and it was all just that. It's not what obviously I needed the whole experience that I alluded to put me to that level that I was ready to be employed by a national newspaper. But it was a case of just getting details and then sending an email with carefully formulated over a few weeks maybe of what I was going to say, do, expressions and examples of work. And then before I knew it, it was kind of, do I do a trial shift? And from there on in, a year on, I'm now feeling the gang. So it just showed that I made it. And it was absolutely, it's nerve-wracking when, as I mentioned earlier, these are the papers that grew up reading and always looking at the back pages, the pullouts, and some of the names. We've been sitting on deadline day looking, seeing where's the Scott Burns exclusive and things like that. Before I was in the industry, I was always like looking for these people's content, and then when I'm getting like accepted and like, yeah, do you want to do? But initially it was just like a trial sort of thing, and we were just doing like short, like 3-4 hour evening shifts when I was experienced people either side of me to kind of guide me. But then without very little training or even much negotiation, it just all kind of came into place that I was making a good impression, and I feel like it helped being thrown into the deep end. And if any editors end and listen, probably would maybe agree that so it can be overwhelming, but didn't get too much training. But the best training and best advice I got was kind of just throw yourself in there and kind of sometimes had to learn the software and things like that, learn the right words to use. Like, as I say, I've done blogs and all that over years, and I was doing stuff for like while I was a student, but writing for one of the biggest papers in Scotland for a very high reach, I think maybe 200,000-300,000 people on the Facebook and Twitter, etc. It's a small margin for error to get things wrong. So it's that sort of pressure on you. It's different putting something out when it's a niche market. No disrespect to anyone's football listeners, but if something goes wrong, it can go under the radar a bit more. Whereas you're working for record, it's like everything has to go smoothly. So there's all that, like learning how to work under pressure and things like that. But it was just a case of getting that, being lucky to get tipped off with that contact and get the references that I needed from the people that I've been doing student work with. So it made the student work in my own time kind of worthwhile, because grand portfolio of things. Obviously, choose your best ones. Good, like spoke to like the aforementioned Caroline Williams, people that I knew that were high profile, that had worked, the interviews had worked well, and the editors would probably know as well. So it was like, if they can see I'm producing the standard and can have the ability to speak to these people. I think she was playing for Man City at the time. It's like they'll hopefully think that I'm capable and competent enough to step into the environment at a national newspaper, because it just shows sometimes there's that element of luck. Obviously, as you're getting that theme, I've worked hard for it, but there's other people that perhaps would probably go out of university, do a journalism degree, go out of university and maybe work at a local like Ayrshire Gazette or like a local paper, then learn the trade, and then eventually
move up almost,
4 or 5, 6 years later, you end up at national paper. So for me, at 23 years old now, there is that weight on your shoulder and sense of responsibility, but sometimes it's that you actually thrive on it as well. In a sense, you just relish that. Like you just learn, and going back to that, doing a thick skin, going back to learning all these little things over the years. Now I'm in a year on, maybe this time last year, might have not felt that like calm over work, but I just kind of learned not to panic or stress myself out too much over things or dwell on it too much either.
Listen, I think in any industry you can make mistakes, and I think probably the difference is you're almost in the kind of magnifying glass of kind of national newspaper. And I think probably journalism, for me, and again, this is just my own opinion, some random in house on Fife, right? That journalism gets a bit of a kick in now, because I think of, you mentioned obviously you kind of started doing blogs and stuff. I think a lot of kind of fan media these days is almost the kind of go-to source for a lot of people. So obviously I'm a Hearts supporter. I mean, probably one of the only Hearts fans that doesn't have a Hearts podcast. But I'm not disparaging about them. There's some very, very good ones out there. But I mean, I naturally go to a Hearts one in terms of Hearts content. But when I come to like a BBC or a Daily Record, I come there for kind of neutrality, for kind of almost matter of fact, and you want it to be accurate almost in terms of, if I, as I said, watch a Hearts podcast or watch an Aberdeen podcast, they can be biased, can be inaccurate. I'm not that bothered, but I think there's almost this kind of fine line and probably an unfair kind of the bar's been set higher, I think, as well in terms of demand, because traditionally, growing up for me, same for you, that obviously had that kind of finite time to get an article out. You would obviously, it would go, obviously, like, I don't know, 10 o'clock, it goes in the evening, gets printed overnight, it's in their news agents in the morning, whereas now something happens in real time, a player has a confrontation on the pitch or afterwards or tweets, the expectation is the media have to then report it there and then and be one of the first. Is that, can you say that pressurised situation? So is it different to what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, it has, but little me who wanted to be a sports journalist, a sports broadcaster, work in the industry, I said this to my dad after my first shift, and don't let go lose my job for saying it's not in a bad way, but more so that if I just stopped now, I've done what my dream was, is to work in the industry, like just doing that one shift, because I was so proud that, oh my God, I'm now doing this in the industry as such and being trusted. And yeah, you totally hit the nail on the head, Greg, with the fact of it's 24-hour news now. It's really, I find it tough. It's never really, like, friends and family start to me, like, do I ever switch off? But I've got notifications on for every team, player, etc. So even if I'm not working, you say having that social media presence, you want to be first to, if there's a big asset for a decision, if it's something that's going on with announcement from teams, you want to be that news source that people think, oh yeah, I'm going to go to him for the information as well. So it's hard, and even editors will have that demand that it's like, yeah, as you say, the decision happens, you want to be the first to get it out, but it's also, I find myself a lot in accuracy as well, and not sticking nail in anyone, because I don't think that's right. And I'm not saying that's the case, but it's getting something out fast, but also getting
pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pressure to get out fast, but also get out accurate as well, because you put something out and give the brief gist of the story, but it's not really reflecting the full story of how you properly write it and things like that. But just to get onto Google, get on social media, is all that demand as well, because just clicks nowadays. Yeah, and the paper side of things, people like my grandparents and them still love to buy the papers in the morning, and nothing beats getting your name in print in the paper. But now with 24/7 news, it's that case of clicks for online things like record, online sport, drive us and, I guess, keep me in the job. So it's that as well. You want thing to get out first. You want to spot something that other people haven't seen, or get that interview or tip off from someone first, because in a sense, you mentioned saturated, but that's what can happen in the Scottish media industry. It's so small that same things can end up being repeated as well. Yeah. So it's like you need to be the first, and it's learning how to deal with that high pressure situations, and it comes with, as I say, self-learning. Might have taken longer before to do certain things because you're getting used to the system, because we use quite a complicated system. But then now, just like driving a car or learning to drive, etc., it just comes second nature. If I log into my computer or log into whatever, and I'm doing it from, or like even the style of tweets, different companies will have different ways of doing things. So, but every day, could say that a year on, learned a lot, but every day is a learning day. Like today at work, learning new things about how social media algorithms work and things like that for journalists and what works well. And it's all fascinating because we're in such a like an ever-changing environment as well, with the way technology is changing, and even the way Google often update their servers. It would surprise you some of the things you think this will do great that doesn't, and things that you think, oh, we'll just get this to have like Hibs or Hearts or something out there, but it gets out to a really high audience and people really perceive it. So sometimes there's no rhyme or reason either.
I was going to say, hopefully the algorithm means this will be highly watched. But I'm just sitting back and taking it in terms of, as you're saying, you're having on the algorithms of like, articles and what's going to work and whatnot. It's a far cry from, as you say, growing up watching Sonia Luku and Scott Severin and Lee Miller and thinking about their stats to where it is now in terms of like it's just totally different in terms of how much I suppose it's evolved as well. Sorry, but I mean it's fascinating. So one of the things as well I was going to ask you about, obviously you've kind of joined in a kind of, can we say post-COVID world or after the event of COVID has came across. Traditionally, you've kind of got almost, I'm thinking like Fleet Street in London, where obviously you've got all the editors or whatever. It's almost like a kind of busy, vibrant office. But you were saying almost previous as well, when we spoke first met, that you're having to do this sometimes working from home. So how's that? Like, how do you deal with that in terms of you're saying you're writing articles, you're trying to keep on the ball, but it's not as if like you're in an office and you're asking so and so what are they doing, and John's doing that, and Sheila's doing that. You're having to kind of work on your own and work alone. How does that work?
Yeah, I think doing the masters in that kind of COVID world set me up. If I was just going straight into doing it in this way of like working from home, I would have been like, isolated, you don't feel like you're getting that support. But because I had got used to Zoom and Teams and all this now methods of keeping in touch with people, sometimes working from home can really suit. So say there's like an evening game on, instead of me trying to get back when my shift's finished at like 11 p.m, if I'm not at the game and I'm maybe perhaps keeping everything ticking together, sometimes you have that job, but sometimes you need to just be that reading over everything, doing the tweets. It can be a lot happening at once, especially on a match night, say Champions League or something. So with kind of that working from home environment, I feel it works, and I think just society's kind of now just adopted that people just seems acceptable, that now I have my desk and I have my setup, and if I go here, I'm focused, and we'll have meetings throughout the day sometimes of like, okay, so we're going to do this podcast, or we're going to do this live, or we're going to make sure that we get this press conference or whatever. But even press conferences nowadays, like I know Aberdeen still do theirs over Zoom, and I think Scotland do as well. And I'm not sure about all the other Premiership teams completely, but I think it's just a way of life for a lot of people now. And I don't actually mind it, because sometimes it's convenient just to. I miss when I'm not in like the office, whatever, having that personal, as we said before we even went on this chat, having that personal interaction with each other, because that human connection is what I thrive upon. But there's also that sense of you can just put your laptop down or whatever, and you can still find it hard to switch off because you're journalists, so you've got to kind of keep aware of what's going on. But at least you've not got that like commute or things like that. Like once I'm finished, I'm finished. I can just switch it off and enjoy my evening or whatever. So it's a double-edged sword. I don't particularly detest it, because it is that hybrid of like offices, being at games, and also doing it from home. So you get that mix, and then you get to know how the operation works, and you learn how much things like online communication and keeping in touch with each other can make sure that no one's doing duplicate articles or things like that. Everyone always just like, if people that's been there, I'm lucky in the records instance, people have been there probably for like a decade or more. So not imposter syndrome, but it's like sometimes I think I should, like, why am I not this rapid at doing this, or why do I prefer doing it in this way or whatever. But everyone
plays their own style, don't they, Robbie? So I think
yeah,
that's it. I think you can only be the kind of true and authentic version of yourself. That's it. You can't really compare Robbie and Greg because they're two different people.
absolutely.
But I mean, one of the things is you learn how the operation works, and this is probably a good time to perhaps debunk a myth or a commonly held opinion. So, obviously, you grew up an Aberdeen supporter. You go down, obviously, working in Glasgow for the Daily Record, which again is the city in which two of the sort of biggest teams in Scotland are based: Glasgow Celtic and Glasgow Rangers. So, are you asked? How is it like a Harry Potter sorting hat in terms of you become the Rangers supporter or a Celtic supporter? How does it happen? Because I think for a lot of people, it was always it's kind of like a tongue in cheek that Celtic fans may say it's a Rangers paper, and you have Rangers supporters going it's a Celtic paper, and yeah, they're only trying to print stories negatively about the other team. So true, false. Can we call that debunked?
I'm laughing because I totally get that stigma anti, but no, I think ultimately it's what I've realised, and I maybe had that thoughts before, not that thoughts in that sense, but they predominantly will cover Rangers and Celtic, but who's won the league every year since the 80s? Who are those sides? Who has the biggest fan bases? What do we require to keep going? Clicks, readership. So you're leading to them. Stirring the pot ending, I wouldn't say so, but there is that. Obviously, I try as fairly as possible to try get some Hearts or Hibs, Dun United, Aberdeen, of course, which I've been slowly trying to implement some features and things for my team. But it's having and I think the way football media has changed as well, because I used to think that as a journalist, you have to really hide who you support and things like that. But maybe in some cases you do, but from watching The View from the Terrace and people like that while I was doing my masters, that's when I probably got into that show, or even just in more recent times. It's these people work for newspapers as well, and they don't hide make a big song and dance all of the teams they support, and it seems to work. And it's for me, as long as when I'm writing even about Aberdeen, if there's a penalty, it goes for or against them, or decision, I've got to take away that red tinted glasses and know that I'm writing as a neutral. Yeah, that's the team, and on a Saturday you support them, but you got to write accurately and concisely as well. So it's learning that and just taking that because in any sense, no one could ever lie and say there wasn't going to have that sense of if you're a Rangers fan or Celtic fan, and you probably not even mean it. You could be the best journalist in the world and probably still have that edge of, if people knew you would maybe know, okay, he's this supporter. But I would say everyone in my industry, not just at the record, I'd like to think everyone does set out to write articles with the best of intentions, rather than to stir the pot, or I don't know what the stereotypes are. I've had emails from people saying, "Oh, why do you not showcase Celtic's European form as bad as I've seen you write this and this about Rangers?" People do that, and they'll think I've got an agenda, a personal agenda against a certain team. And I personally I don't. That's the thing. I'd like to get that out there. I don't, but I'd like to try to write accurately about any team or person or player or whatever's happened. Try to put it down in facts, or from the best I perceive. But this goes back to how what we said earlier, everyone perceives things differently. So a different person it's sort of going back to that job interview thing. Two people could email about the same article but have the complete opposite, saying,
exactly,
too negative about this or too positive about this. So it's no winner, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I didn't think people would actually still do that, in terms of actually take the time to email you in and complain that you're too biased or too partisan towards a certain team. But yeah, I mean, I was going to say it's good to know. It's interesting to know that still is the case. But I mean, one of the things I want to kind of talk about, a couple of things before we can wrap up on the journalism aspect of it as well. But obviously you've now seen yourself, as I said, going from sort of reporting on live matches, giving the live blogs as well. Actually, you've covered some interesting games over the last year. Were you doing the Dundee United 7-0 in Alkmaar? Was that your one?
I was doing that. Yeah.
So you've had some big ones. You've had Celtic and Rangers in Europe as well.
Yeah, Rangers in Europe as well. Yeah, but it was the joy of like last season. But I was more when I was first starting and involved, so I wasn't there. But I was a part of the process of how it works and liaising with people that was doing it and kind of chipping in at that point with a, I guess, terrific run to the Europa League final last season. So there was that joy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I've been involved in some kind of downer things for Scottish people, and it's learning to read the tone as well. And that's when it goes where you can't show any personal bias or anything. You have to reflect on no matter who scored. And also because we're a Scottish paper, we'll have that. The European night will be different because you'll be more overjoyed, I guess, for the Scottish team because that's what we're trying to reflect. But then, unfortunately, this season's campaign hasn't been much positivity to keep too right about the Scottish team.
Yeah. But hopefully next year things will pick up. Obviously, it's been a good weekend at the time of recording in terms of Scottish football of domestic action. And obviously, is it in the last year that you got your verified, I know you said about your blue tick and obviously status, is that through working at the Daily Record that you managed to get that?
Yeah, it was. So many people asked me about that. And it was actually, I think it must have been a year ago today of recording, because the only reason I know why is a time hop came up today of me at the rugby at Murrayfield, and it was the same day that I seen, or someone had told me, I'd always wondered how you get a blue tick. And it was a case of now having a Reach PLC like email address and having work published in a national newspaper / like website that's I'd like to say well respected, but you basically apply for Twitter and then they see if you meet this criteria. So yeah, I got like emailed through and then just seeing it's maybe just as proud as I was finding out a graduation or at uni, because it's something that I always seen blue tick people as like celebrities. So it's like, well, we Robbie, I'm not sure. I wasn't sure. I was like, what the heck? And then that happened in the morning just before I was going to the rugby. I got that email. Then when at the rugby, and I get a notification saying John Cena had followed me on Twitter. And like the real John Cena, he still got Undertaker, WWE earlier, but I was just mesmerized because I grew up just obsessed with wrestling. Loved John Cena. Had like the chain and the hat and everything, in big elimination chambers at home and all that. And then somehow you get a blue tick, WWE wrestling in America following me, and I'm just like, what on earth? And then gradually, I think that kind of getting that role at Daily Record, pushing from doing the just little kind of starting off, breaking in sort of tasks to fully fledged into it, became even more useful with Twitter, because I wasn't really big into like, I probably used it more coming to for music, like during lockdown with like virtual pub crawl and things. I didn't really use it for connecting with other like-minded people, but it was amazing once I got that blue tick, the people that you do connect with as well from the industry, and then you kind of, it's that sense of, it comes with the industry, it comes even more so a blue tick, because people are looking and be like, oh, that person's serious, he's a journalist.
They've got credibility, yeah, they've got a real...
You can't be, and the best one was Anthony Stewart, moving from Aberdeen captain now, but moving from Wickham to Aberdeen. And then I put on Twitter, I'd been tipped off about what was happening by a couple of friends, including one of our State of Scottish Football friends, but about this, and I didn't know too much about it. But then after speaking to one of my old like school friends, he got in touch with this person, and it all just was the first example of just like how sources get about, and I would realize how people in the industry like get sources of transfers and all that. And then it was like, I'm just going to put this on Twitter. It was enough credit. I was still not 100%, but it was like this seemed like, I think it is viable news to put out there, and not through Daily Record, just through my own Twitter. And because I've got a blue tick within, you don't realise how much people, like, all these written one was about 30 retweets within like half an hour, and it was all like.
And John Cena was asking about it as well. He was tweeting, asking what was going on. He was he loves his Aberdeen news.
But it was like all these folk were like retweeting, saying, "Oh, this journalist is saying this and that," and it was that like sickening feeling that I didn't realise how not useful, but how wide a reach you can get on Twitter, especially with that blue tick, but the credibility, because then folk are all saying breaking and like news and all that, like for podcast themselves and things like that. And I'm like, but this is still at the stage that there's no one else knows.
It's pub chat. It's pub chat almost, kind of. As far as you know, it could be pub chat almost. You had enough in it, but
yeah, none of Scottish media has got any of this. And I'm thinking, okay, like you think to yourself, is enough? And then I'm checking my mate again, and you double question yourself and think, am I getting led on and all that? So then do your own kind of
diligence, do your own diligence on it,
yeah. And then I think it was just a day or two after, it was like P&J and then the record and all that catch on to it, and it was what the case that I had been told and I put out was right, and it was one of those, I think that helped increase my followers. It just showed that how these things work, that grapevine and building, like how important. And then since then, there's been a few lower league England people that I've ended up connecting with, and telling me like David Bates when he was rumoured with these things and all that. And I just realised how important the journalism sphere is actually. Yes, can be oversaturated like fan media and podcasts, but actually people at the companies and like the blue tick brigade, it's quite a small sphere, so everyone kind of gets, even like when I'm at press conferences at games, kind of get to know people, even they might work for PLZ Soccer or the Herald or the Sun. You get to know them because you're seeing the same familiar faces. So it's building that context up, just like going back to the women's football, but building that up with just connections and agents and things like that as well, because then that's how you become recognised and respected. And look at Fabrizio Romano now, how much contacts has he got?
Got his own podcast. I mean, the guy, I think he just takes everyone else's sources. But I'll not ask you if you're going to be playing $8 a month moving forward. I mean, we'll skip that. I know I don't want either of us to get cancelled early stages of our careers in terms of this podcast, and obviously your blossoming career at Daily Record. Again, we've mentioned it probably for the last hour and a half during this podcast as well, but you are a massive music lover as well. And it's something which anytime I speak to you or anytime I click on your profile or something, you're at a gig. And at the time of recording, I was texting you last night, you were at a gig last night as well. So you're with Clyro. So you're a massive music fan. So I mean, I'm going to give you some kind of quick fire questions, but just so people can kind of get an understanding of your kind of musical taste as well. And obviously, I'm sure you'll elaborate on some of the stories. But I need to ask then, what was your musical influence growing up, or who were your musical influencers growing up?
Well, my dad, because my dad, he hasn't changed. I love my dad, but he hasn't changed. Like now, I'm 23, he's in his 50s, and he still plays the exact same music that he played when I was in the car with him. I remember from being like a baby when I was getting carried up to the house and everything to this present day, been on road trips to London and everything. It's still the same sort of musical influence, like of David Bowie, The Clash, Sex Pistols, things like that. And my stepsister as well, she like favorite band, as people know me on social media, Libertines, seen them 14 or 15 times, and stepsister was always into that. Was her and her pals. She's 10 years older than me. That was always there. They done the exact what I'm doing now. They done the same, but back when Libertines were at the heyday in the early thousands, and it was just them. My dad playing music in the car, or always waking up in the morning, blasting on the stereo, putting on songs, plays them. He just loves, and then he take me to gigs as well from a young age. Like his photos of me in like Drummond's in Aberdeen, but just for people that don't know, it's like a small music venue, maybe about 300 people, I guess, could fit there at a push. But his gigs, like, I think he took me to like a Thin Lizzy tribute when I was like 13 or 14. And I was like the youngest person there by far. Even if I'd been old enough to drink, I'd been the youngest person. But it's because I appreciated the music and really wanted to go along because I'd been brought up listening to that and just got that just that bug of the community. Spoke for the last hour and a half about that community around football and the love for football, but I think that's the same about loving a band or having that connection to a certain song or band can really bring people together as well. And I think it's a good escape from especially how like toxic the world can be in life. I think I like live music and gigs because it's just kind of that for 2 hours or so you just switch off and just immersed. Everyone in the room is there for the same reason and you just enjoy yourself 99.9 times out of 10.
Definitely. Definitely. And again, you said the Thin Lizzy tribute band. One of my friends, I think, he watches everything that I do. I'm hoping he'll be watching this. Steve, he'll be wondering who they were and whether we can go and get to see them soon. I'll need to get details after this. But it's probably leading on to my next one then, obviously, your influences. What was your first concert or a gig growing up?
First one?
Or one of the ones you can remember?
I have a feeling there's a photo. I'll have to dig it out. It's a photo Mum sent me recently of me in a buggy. It was an event in Aberdeen called Free at the D. I think, and there was also one at Hazelhead Park. There was one in Duffy Park and one at Hazelhead Park, and there was 3 events. And there was like, I'm pretty sure it was like the Claimers, even McDonald. Like I was like a lot of Scottish artists there. Sandy Tom, I think as well. And I remember being there, but I can't properly. But I was in a buggy, but I remember being there and
dancing away.
But in terms of the actual first gig, it's vivid memories. Like as I say, like 13 years old, going to like that my dad at Drummond's. But I think my mum and dad always, if they could, would take me to. I remember going like some random Sunday night when I was like 8 years old to see like McDonald Brothers or something. I'm pretty sure they did a cover of one of their popular songs. I can't remember.
Shangalang. Was it Shangalang they sang, is it?
Yeah. And it's not even a band I don't even think my dad. It's interesting. I think it was just we wanted to do something together, let younger people in and see live music. And ever since, and just at the time of recording, last night I was at Biffy Clyro, but on Friday I was in seeing The Damned, and it was the first time they'd played with the original lineup in 30 years, and that's band that was the first punk band in 1978 or something, and 20 odd years before I was born. But because my dad's played these music over the years, I was enjoying the gig just as much or as more as they was, and they done a cover of Last Time by Rolling Stones, and I just love that. And I think doing things that you enjoy with your family as well, like we're staying away. I don't see my dad that much, but when you do, and it's like that theme of that influence he's brought me listening to music. Now I'm old enough to be covering and appreciating in a different way. It's really nice as well. And as I say, it's just that you meet some interesting at football. Even if you support the same team, I get the feeling that it's maybe the same at Hearts, Greg. It's always that cliques. So folk have different opinions on this and that, or Nielsen in, Nielsen out, good win out, or opinions on players, etc. Whereas if you get a gig, everyone's there for that reason to see the gig, and you kind of just got that common connection. Oh, love the songs and everything. Because you wouldn't be paying in this day and age. Sometimes a concert ticket is 60, 70 quid or more. So you wouldn't be paying that if it wasn't a passion or you didn't want to see it. So it's for me something that I just, if I can, I always just want to get to a gig. That's always like, but I think it's my off time. It used to be football over music, and I think because my job's football, that comes less of a hobby. It comes less of a hobby and more of my hobby is music, because doing football most of the time it's in a work capacity, so it's finding that kind of what's that alternative to football while I've grown up loving music. And then with stay myself, I think I listen to more music than ever, because you like I don't want to sit in silence, so having music on it's kind of opened my horizon. Some of the bands you find and all that, from just you end up to 2 a.m. just find a new band and you like this sound. It's an amazing thing about the internet. Hopefully that happens with people this podcast that just stumble upon it and really enjoy it and want to listen to more. But that's what's happened with me with a lot of bands as well. Like with the Clydo, I had heard bits of, and going back to Kenny with the podcasting, Anyone's Game, me and him used to do a radio show together on a Tuesday on Johnston Sound, and he's from Ayrshire, he used to always play Biffy Clydo on the radio show. And I knew of them, but I didn't actually really know much about them or like their music. But I got into listening to them through him playing it on the radio. And then now I've ended up seeing them 4 times in the space of a year. So it shows how other people can be a good influence on you as well that way. And then I'm probably more bigger fan than him and obsessed with them now. And just because they've put on performances that I'm like, whoa, they're brilliant live. And you just want more and more.
Definitely. I mean, you've kind of led me on to my next question here. Again, I've got a few quick fire ones, but can you tell us an artist or band that people should know about now before they make it big?
Know about now? It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell how big bands are. Like I love the Snuts, and I guess they're a newer band, but I don't know. You could probably say they're very big because they're playing festivals. Same, like the newer bands I'm into is Snuts and probably Wet Leg, but I would say they're both.
Wet Leg.
Yeah, but I think they came out in 2019, probably not that new. But I'm trying to think who else.
Sounds like a Wesley tribute band. I'm out of the loop. I was like Wesley. Wet Leg. I'll have to give them a.
Give them a listen. Look at the woman band. They're like, have you heard of the band Idols? They're kind of like the kind of like the woman version of them, but they're really good. They only started in 2019, but they're just kind of properly breaking into the industry now. And there's even a lot of really good like smaller bands as it go back to during lockdown. It was the virtual pub crawl, and every Saturday they'd have like someone put a playlist on Twitter, and we'd all follow along to the playlist and have a few drinks, and it'd be a mix of old tunes and some new ones as well. Like Aberdeen band, like Apollos, I think they're brilliant. There's what's the band? Skylights, Yorkshire band. Seen them twice, superb as well. Like, and they now have a song at Pathology that they've mixed. The Yorkshire band, but they have a song played at Pathology because they've remixed the lyrics "Stand Fee for Every Bee" in it, and they've got that connection now. The Leeds, Aberdeen, and they've now went from playing the Unit 51, which is a small venue, a year and a half ago, to next year they're playing Lemon Jeep, which is a lot bigger venue, and they've got all that core. And I think Skylights, even though the band members are a bit older in terms of like saying newer band, but they're finally having that breakthrough of that they could be playing at a higher level as well. So yeah, I just love all sorts of genre, and I'd never say I'd narrow myself down to being because some people even more when I spoke to a mate say, I'm just a Dark Fruits Twitter starter pack when it comes to music that I like. But I never say that because there's such a variation of music that I listen to, from modern day stuff to older punk stuff to rock stuff to down at the Wembley in September for like Taylor Hawkins tribute. And I'm not ashamed to say, like, Queen are one of my favourite bands, and seeing them I was in tears, and it just shows how there's not a lot. Mum was saying that when I was telling her, like, it's like a lot of important things I've been to and not shed a tear, but yeah, go to something like that, and music, just hearing a certain song or whatever can just give such emotion. And it was just because I always wanted to see them as well. So it's things like that it just none beats that goosebumps or feeling of like standing there watching like your favorite artist that you maybe only ever listened to on your Spotify or whatever, but seeing them live is whole kettle of fish. And it's a shame because there's people that I'm friends with it at my age and never been to any gigs because that's just what they've not been brought up with. So I'm probably lucky that I've had that influence from a young age as well.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, I've not been to a gig in a good few years. I mean, I've been to Tea in the Park and you see like local events and stuff as well with bands, but it's probably something just over the last couple of years. I've not been to a gig in a while. I've been to more, I've seen more comedians and concert venues than I have actual bands and stuff, which is a bit appalling to be honest. But right, we'll finish off with another sort of venue question, and then we can just talk about music. But what is the best venue for you in Scotland for a gig?
In Scotland, I'd say the Barras. Like I know it's a cliche question, and I've only probably been there about 5 times. Like a lot of gigs I go to don't tend to be there, but when I have been there, just the whole history of the Barras and the steps with like names of artists and everything, and just I think with the low roof is and just being like a ballroom, like seeing specials there. I've seen them twice there, and just like the atmosphere and just the buzz, like the whole setup of the venue is really good. And look at some of the bands that's played there over the years as well. It's kind of holds that test of time. Obviously, King Tut's Flower Hat to get a shout out because that's where Oasis were formed, and that's probably arguably I'd say one of my favorite bands. I didn't put them favorite, but I've always loved Oasis longer of like Libertines. So it's like I do always like to go through that pilgrimage of King Tut's Flower Hat. I think it's the most iconic for that sense, but I don't actually think it's a good music venue. The setup, so the Barras would definitely get my answer for if I was going to say to anyone, if you wasn't a music lover and you're listening to this and you fancy going to a gig, just experience the Barrowland Ballroom just once.
I mean, you've probably heard of them, but like a band called We Are Scientists. I remember growing up, like 16 would have been at the Barras, and it was just amazing. It was just like I don't know, you could see the sound in the air, like it was weird. And again, it was so surreal, and it was just amazing. And again, at that age, like having a cheeky wee cider and stuff like that as well, like just absolutely loving life. But no, that was good. In terms of your favourite artists right now, I think you've kind of alluded to a few times. The Libertines, is that the band for you?
Yeah, I just say ever since first time I seen them, I won't go into the details of the story. But first time I saw them was Tea in the Park 2015. They headlined just before Avicii on like Saturday. I went with my stepsister and her pals. We were all big Libertines lovers and go to Glastonbury and abroad to see them and everything. And it was just ever since seeing them then that I kind of just got hooked. But I don't know if it was just because there was always that link that stepsister and all that liked him, but I just somehow just became the band that I can't go talk about my dad still playing the same music over years. I'll play Up the Bracket is my favorite album of all time, Libertines album, and I'll listen to that most days. Like if there's one bit of music up, like some bands you like, but Stone Roses I love, but I don't listen to them frequently. Whereas Up the Bracket by Libertines is like a stick on that if I'm fancying putting music on, even after this show, I'd be like, yeah, let's get YouTube on, let's get Up the Bracket on. It's just something about it, like, and then going back to that community, I go to gigs all the time, but I don't wait for the band at most of the gigs. But because I've had been like down in London at DJ sets and met Carl and Pete, and I've had interactions with them before, it always somehow become like they'll now recognize me and be like, oh, not him again and all that. And you build up that banter. And I've been for beers like in London after Dirty Pretty Things. So that's Carl Barat, the co-singer from Libertines, like side project. And after the reunion show in London, like went for like beers and all that with him and the band and a guy from the Claxons, and they invited us, like me and a few other people who we'd all encountered them before, mostly through Libertines, and it was like, well, just come with us to the bar. And it was that kind of interaction that just fuels that love for a band even more, because some music artists might think, oh, they're too big for their own boots, and I got to speak to like just the average fan. But I think that's why the Libertines community for me is it's the best community of music, because they always had, even before I was into them, like fan forums before the internet was a major thing, like libertines.org, and they just say, oh, by having a gig, it's before they got big, they'd have a gig in like their own house, and it's on YouTube. They had a gig with 30 people there, just put on this fan forum, doing a gig, tenors at the door, in their own house, and then done that. And they've always had that interaction with the fans. And I think once I learned that and learned the history of the band, and it's good and bad history of the band, as people don't know, but it's just one of these things that I've become obsessed in a sense, that, and that's why I've seen them, I think 15 times now. So yeah, they're always, as much as there's so much variety of my music taste, it always seems to come back to the Libertines. And it's even just this week, and a guy I met in Glasgow who's from Birmingham, who was like the same type of person as me. He went himself from Birmingham to Glasgow, and we met each other at the St. Luke's, and he had not planned anything anyway to stay. Just like, I just needed to get down or up to see Libertines. He follows them everywhere, and that's like me. I'll just they're playing somewhere it's remotely accessible. It's like, yes, I need to go.
I'll go down.
Yeah.
Good, Robbie. I could speak to you for another almost 2 hours here. I mean, I think it might have to be another part 2, but I mean, it's good that we end on music as well, because again, I think you said that before, going back to uni days as well, that you obviously done, was at college, back in your music project as well at college, and then like that's obviously something I can see you doing, like being a sort of musical, being involved there. I know, like, you talk about sporting heroes and stuff, and in terms of journalists, I know Stuart Cosgrove as well is another one that's kind of off the ball, who's kind of dabbled obviously in music as well, and now is kind of knows that kind of sports broadcaster as well. But what does the future hold for you? Or do you have any sort of future ambitions then? Would you want to sort of have a crossover and kind of work in the music industry as a journalist? Do you want to, become the media officer at Aberdeen? That, what's kind of your ambitions?
It's a tough one, because Daily
Record's my dream job. I'll be there till the end of the
day. Dreams can change every day, because I've lived my dream in a sense of I've been out at important games and press conferences. I've worked for arguably the biggest newspaper in Scotland in a job that I enjoy. So I'm in no hurry to like have that transition or whatever. But it's also, I'm very young, is 20, 30 odd years or more of a career. So it's one of those that if music remains a passion, I would love to, or probably something old here. I don't know if that's the end thing now, but like work for NME or something like that, be interviewing bands, because like I've done bits of that going back to my blog and going back to that college project. I've done bits interviewing bands before, and I've got press passes for gigs and all that, but all off my own back. I've never had like paid stuff in music. So if that like route kind of path like arise, then definitely it's something that I'd love to do. Like just yesterday, I was a failed attempt to get Glastonbury tickets, and that's like my bucket list thing. As a music connoisseur, it's like I've got to go, and I was absolutely devastated. So it's that case of I'd love to be like Edith Bowman or someone like that, or the people probably using an old example of BBC Three, but growing up, you'd watch like the side of the stage interviewing the bands on BBC from like Glastonbury and all that. That I think, because my knowledge of music and passion for it, I think, and also even using the skills, because the things that I do in the sports aspect of things you can transfer into music.
Definitely.
You've still got that core passion. So I really think that's no rush to change into music, but I'd love, and even if anyone listens to this and they have a music project or something they run, even like a magazine, something that's not knowing where that route is in, but I'd love to do more of that. And for all the gigs I go to, it's probably some good opportunities or good things that could write about the bands as well. So yeah, definitely. But there is that, you go back to, not to ramble on, but you do go back to media officer at Aberdeen. In Aberdeen, it's always your club. It's that sense of like doing something at your own club. How going back to the whole Andy Considine thing, living the dream
Yeah.
of being employed. There is that sense as well, but you just never know what you have to use that sense of you never know what the future holds. That is an option, and being the next. Me and Kenny being the next off the ball folk. I mean, you being the next off the ball folk would be amazing. But it's just the mantra. The mantra that I have is not to be stealing off at Ange Postecoglou or anything. We never stop. But just a case of always have to. Yeah, I'm now. It's like a year milestone at the record, but you don't just stop there and think, oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm cushy in what I'm doing. Always striving to learn things or improve or things like that and seek opportunities. And I think that's what I try to do, seek opportunities. So yeah, if opportunity comes and NME come calling me something, then I'm not going to say no if it's the right fit, like that Masters story. So yeah, people have to dig up this interview in 5 years' time and see how much of it comes true.
Definitely, and I've got a music analogy for you as well. It's I don't know if you heard of these One Hit Wonders, New Radicals. You only get what you give.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, and certainly on today's podcast, you gave us a lot, Robbie. Really insightful, as I said. I could listen to you for another part 2 for same length and time. But thank you for joining us. As I said, we'll hopefully hear from you in 5 years' time when you're got your own magazine or your own sports show as well. Who knows what the future holds? But hopefully, as I said, everyone will remember this first episode where you are now and where you'll be in the future. But thanks again, Robbie.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Greg. I've loved chatting to you and can't believe 2 hours is up nearly already.
Time flies when you're having fun, and hopefully it's not been enforced.
Absolutely not.